This is the final chapter, chapter 16 for Pasquala. Pasquala means the one who helps others. A hot breeze stirred the ashes in the fire pit as I worked with my aunt preparing the evening meal. Looking up from the fire, I saw a runner from another Yokut's tribe race through the village to our chief's cowie. Soon the chief sent a message to all the men of our village to gather together. I wondered what the men of the tribe were saying to one another. I knew that the runner who had come to our village must have brought important news. Late that night, my uncle returned to our cowie, and I heard him talking to my aunt in a low voice. He said that there was trouble at Mission Santa Ynez. One of the Indians at the mission had been badly beaten by the soldados. The word of this beating had spread to the two other missions. The neophytes at the mission Santa Ynez, La Parusma, and Santa Barbara said that they would no longer take the cruel treatment from the soldados. The neophytes of the missions were asking for help from the Yokuts people. They wanted our people to help them fight the soldados. My uncle said that our chief was organizing a war party from our village to join the war parties from other Yokuts villages. My uncle would lead the warriors from our village on the long journey over the mountains to the mission. I lay on my tule mat wide awake thinking about the mission and the people who lived there. If there was to be an attack on the mission, I knew it would be soon and sudden and probably at night. I knew the soldados were cruel, but there were many kind and gentle people at the mission. I thought of the padres who had saved my life when I was very young. Should I help them and perhaps save their lives? I stayed awake thinking about my uncle's words, and in my mind I struggled with the decision I alone would have to make. I had worked hard to be accepted by my own tribe, and I asked myself over and over again what would be the right thing to do if I went to the mission. It would anger my people. If I didn't go to the mission, someone might be hurt because I hadn't warned them. It was a difficult decision, but soon I knew that I must run the long journey through the valleys and over the mountains to warn the padres at the mission. After what seemed a long time, my uncle left the cowie and went to the sweat house with the other men to take sweat baths. The night-long sweat baths would prepare the men's bodies and minds for the attack on the mission. I lay very still on my tule mat, waiting until my aunt and everyone in the cowie was sound asleep. The time had come to leave. I quietly got up and filled a pouch with acorn meal, seeds, and dry meat. I slipped like a shadow out of the cowie into the cool night. Closing around me, the darkness became my friend, and hid me from the sharp eyes of the camp guard. I could hear the low voices of the men in the sweat house as I moved quickly toward the tules. Slowly but steadily, I ran on the path that would lead over the mountain passes to the mission. I remembered this path from the happy days many years ago when I had traveled to the seashore with my parents and my people. Although my tribe had gone to the seashore many times since I had come home, I had never again traveled with them to the ocean. Would I remember the trail? Would I lose my way? Would warriors from my tribe overtake me? I ran faster, being careful to watch the trail in front of me and behind me. When I was too tired to go further, I found a place off the trail to sleep. After an hour's rest, I began to run again. I wound my way upward over the first range of hills. Late that night, I stopped to rest by the river and fell asleep, like the spreading branches of an oak tree. When I awoke, I fell asleep under the spreading branches of an oak tree. When I awoke, I ate a small bit of dried meat from my pouch, and the first light of dawn found me beginning the steep climb into the high mountains and pine forests. The trail was well marked and easy to follow, but soon another trail branched off to the right. Which trail should I take? I peered into the shadowy dark green pines. I saw a large shape on the trail ahead of me. I stopped and stared at it. Coming closer, I saw it was the old pine tree that had fallen across our path when the earth shook many years before. Now I knew that this was the right trail to take. I hurried on. My feet were bruised and aching. I stopped only a few times to drink from a brook and to eat the few seeds I had left. If only I could take time to rest. That night, I lay on the ground so tired that I couldn't sleep. Dark clouds hid the moon and cast shadows about me. When I was able, I ran again. For the next 2 days and nights, sometimes running and sometimes walking, I made my way along the rough and narrow trail. By now, everyone in my village would know that I had left to warn the people at Mission Santa Ynez. The war party might be close behind me, and if they found me, they would surely stop me. I had to keep going, even though my heart felt like it would burst. Soon after dawn, the trail led downward, and I knew that Mission Santa Ynez was not too far away. For the most of the day, I ran as hard as I could, and at last I came upon the mission that I had not seen in many years. The few neophytes that I met in the fields did not recognize me. With failing steps, I made my way to the mission padre. How happy I was to see him! His familiar face made my eyes fill with tears. He greeted me with cries of joy. Unable to speak, I couldn't answer his many questions. When I caught my breath, I told the padre that the mission was going to be attacked. The padre took me into the cool corridor and asked a woman to help me into the room. I heard him tell a runner to hurry to a nearby mission and ask for help against the coming attack. The padre gave orders to barricade the mission gates. As the people at the mission prepared for the attack, I could hear the slamming of shutters, locking of doors, and the sound of running feet. I lay on a cot and fell into a fitful sleep. When I awoke, the padre was sitting by my side. Was it hours later? Days later? I felt very weak, but I understood the padre when he told me that my warning had come in time to save the mission. The padre said that many warriors had come to the mission to burn it down, but because of my warning, the people at the mission were prepared to fight. When the warriors realized that their attack was not a surprise, they had left. I lay exhausted on the cot, listening to the soft rustle of the padre's robe as he moved across the room. It was hard for me to breathe, and my chest was filled with pain. I knew the journey that I had run from the Valley of Tules to the mission had been too much for me. As the padre held a cup of water to my lips, I could see the kindness in his eyes. I wanted to tell him about my people and my life in the Valley of the Tules. Slowly, I began to speak. The padre nodded his head when I spoke about my village that lay near the shores of our great blue lake. How beautiful it was when the sun broke through the thick Tule fog and bathed the village and lake in warm sunlight. I told about the vast green and brown patches of the tules that covered the valley floor like a blanket. Tules from Yokut's homes, tules from Yokut's clothing, the tules from Yokut's food, tules that sheltered flocks of birds, ducks, and great herds of elk. Tules, tules, tules. Smiling, the padre listened as I talked about red-winged blackbirds snapping up clouds of buzzing mosquitoes, blue herons standing on their stick-like legs in the marshes, and the never-ending croak of the bullfrogs. I told him how my father had taught me to find the speckled duck eggs hidden deep in the thick patches of tules, and where to find the little fish of the sloughs. The padre bowed his head when I told him how the elders of the tribe had passed on tribal stories that had been told to the elders when they were young. Stories of how and why our people came to be. Stories of how we lived in harmony with nature and took only what we needed from the land. I told the padre how my mother and my father had shared their love for the land and animals with me, and how they had taught me to respect all that the Great Spirit had given to us. When I was too weak to continue, the padre told me to rest. I closed my eyes and I heard him say that he understood my love for my people, the Yokuts. He told me he knew how difficult it had been for me to leave my home in the valley of the Tules to warn the people at the mission. Taking my hand in his, the padre said that the story of my life would be told to many people. He knelt beside my bed. After a long while, he whispered my name. He told me he had named me correctly, for I, Pasquala, was truly the one who loved and helped others. That evening, when the sun sank beyond the hills and the sky turned a crimson red, the call of Watite the ground owl was heard. His long, low wail filled the night air and echoed over the mission. Pasquala's spirit had passed in to Picnic's pond.